This is the DAR Today podcast, and I'm your host, Brooke Bullmaster Stewart. Well, April, right? Things start really happening. A lot of things start happening in March and April and May. It seems like everything just amps up, doesn't it? Everything's waking up, of course, being spring, and we just have so many things to do in our DAR chapters. In fact, are you seeing some of the activities that are happening with the states, with their state regents projects? For those of you who are new, when you have a newly elected state regent, she has a project that she wants to put her time and effort and have the state all come behind her. There's fundraising, and it's a really exciting thing in a community. So we'll be covering one of those states today and their activities. It is a really fun thing to get behind, to have a whole state come together for a particular project. It's really exciting to see, and hopefully you can be a part of that in your own state. In fact, it was interesting. Somebody sent in a comment recently when we asked the question last week, when we said, what was something that you'd like to have known early on when you were a DAR member? And this one member said, I wish I would have known the amazing things that we do in DAR, because I would have gotten involved a lot sooner. And I think that's so true for so many of us. Once we see what DAR does, it's just tremendous. And that's the main reason for this podcast, is to truly show the communities, our own members, what exactly we're doing in DAR. And so speaking of that question we asked last week, we hope you will continue to send in your comments. What was that one thing that you really wish somebody had told you right away when you were a new DAR member, something you wish you would have known sooner? So we'd love to hear from you. You can go in last week and see the details for how to send those in to us, but basically send us an email with your own picture to darpodcast@nsdar.org. So again, for details, look at last week. So also this week, we will be continuing in our Patriot Profile series, where we will talk about actually the life of Hercules Mulligan, who is an amazing Irish patriot. So I will just leave it there for now, and hopefully you will stick around and hear that segment. And because the beginning of April marks the adoption of the American's Creed in our American history, we want to replay that quick little segment that has a compilation of DAR members reciting the American's Creed. It's just an amazing thing. And so we really wanted to play that again, just because it is so significant. One last but very important announcement. April 15th marks the last day to register for the Junior 5K. I know that there are a lot of states competing to see who will get the most registrations. I've heard Virginia is going all out, doing special things. So I would encourage you to register. Again, whether or not you're going to walk or run in this 5K, it is a great way to support the juniors and the Helen Pouch Memorial Fund. There will be a link in the show notes for that. And make sure you go onto your state's Facebook page, your social media page, and encourage everyone else in your state to sign up as well, April 15th. So, of course, we ask that you like and subscribe to this podcast and hit that notification bell so you don't miss an episode. And as always, hey, thanks so much for being here with us today. South Dakota Society DAR State Regent Katherine Terrell has had a number of state regents projects during her 3-year term. One of the most impactful has been supporting the Veterans Community Project of Sioux Falls. This program is getting off the ground with new tiny homes being added frequently. They just opened their community center, a fantastic place that even has a dog washing area. The tiny homes are for homeless veterans that want help with the goal of moving on, eventually having a job and moving into their own apartment. For right now, these veterans living in this community are receiving whatever help they need, from basic needs to physical, dental, and mental health care. Support by the South Dakota DAR has been in the way of collecting household products, clothing, warm socks, board games, winter gear, food products, quarters for their laundry, and of course, money. So far, over $56,000 has been collected, and they aren't done yet. This money raised has been used for household furnishings, building new homes, and items for their new community center. Of course, the South Dakota State Society has also participated in fundraisers to help raise this money for the Veterans Community Project. One clever way of doing this was with decorated Christmas trees donated by different chapters, and the trees were subsequently sold and the money went to the Veterans Community Project. Truly a great example of the way DAR is so impactful in its community. So in South Dakota, the regent there, Katherine Terrell, had a wonderful thing to say when I saw her recently at another state conference, the South Carolina State Conference. And it was such a wonderful component of her state regents project that I thought we'd have her on via Zoom today and have her tell us about it directly. So Katherine Terrell, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Brooke. My theme deals with bees. I chose bees because they're just such an intricate part of our society that we need them to live. My theme is be kind, be thoughtful, be inclusive. And that last part, be inclusive, that for me goes and means reach out to those members that you haven't seen for a long time. Maybe you're looking through the directory and you go, oh, Sally Sue I haven't seen her for a long time. Then why don't you just reach out to those members and contact them, invite them to go to coffee, invite them to your next chapter meeting, but not just invite them to your next chapter meeting, invite them to sit next to you at the next chapter meeting. They might be needing just a little bit of, it's hard to get back into things. So just reach out to them because remember, membership renewal is not just a fall season item. It's year round. So you may wonder in the fall why Sally Sue is not renewing her membership. Well, think about when the last time was you saw her. So reach out to those members. We spend so much time getting members into our chapters, but it's the ones that are there. We need to keep them and make them feel a part of our organization.
Exactly right. I love that because people matter, don't they? It's
Yes.
not just numbers, it's these women in our organization and really honoring them, honoring the commitment that they've made to join and just loving them as people, as our friends. So I love that you did that and you gave everybody these wonderful little earrings, these bee earrings. And I think you're coming to North Carolina as well. So I'm excited to see you there. And thank you so much for sharing this really important message with us today. Katherine Terrell from South Dakota. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
When you're a spy, you want to go unnoticed. With a name like Hercules, that can sometimes be difficult, especially if you're also a prominent businessman in British-occupied Manhattan during the time of the American Revolution. Recent popular history has focused heavily on the Culper ring of spies, but our patriot, Hercules Mulligan, was not counted among their number. His recent attention comes from his inclusion as a character in the hit Broadway musical Hamilton. The play has brought Mulligan's name and legend into the spotlight in recent years, and though Hamilton takes artistic license in many places, especially with the story of Mr. Mulligan, in reality, the life of the real Hercules Mulligan sounds as if it could be fictional. I did love this quote, though, by Lin-Manuel Miranda in an interview where he admitted he could have included many other figures in Hamilton who had bigger roles in Alexander Hamilton's life, but, and I quote, "They don't have the name Hercules Mulligan, so sorry, guys," end quote. First, some basic details on our patriot. He was born in Coleraine, Ireland in 1740 and immigrated to New York when he was about 6. Reportedly large in stature and possessing a gregarious, larger-than-life persona befitting of his first name, he became a tailor in New York in the mid-1770s. Well, after graduating from King's College, Mulligan married Elizabeth Sanders, the niece of Admiral Sanders of the Royal Navy. Quite irrespective of his wife's British background, Mulligan was a staunch patriot. I wonder how their discussions were at the dinner table. Well, as we mentioned, Mulligan became a tailor in Manhattan, and his shop was frequented by the upper echelons of society. High-ranking British officers became regulars at his shop. Successful enough to afford assistance, Mulligan instead preferred to work personally with each of his clients, cultivating genuine relationships with both Americans and British alike. Despite fraternizing with British officers, the young patriot ensconced himself in treasonous affairs. He was one of the first colonists to join the Sons of Liberty and later the New York Committee of Correspondence, two organizations that, of course, sought to undermine British authority in the colonies. Mulligan's first appearance on the stage of history came through his associations with Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton came to colonial New York under the auspices of several merchants doing business in the West Indies, a group that included Hugh Mulligan. After Hamilton failed to get into Princeton on the accelerated program he sought to get into, he enrolled in King's College in Manhattan. Hamilton needed a place to stay, and Hugh arranged to have him board with Hercules and his family. Well, when war broke out in 1775, Hercules Mulligan did his part to help the cause, even joining the militia. But once Washington retreated from New York, however, Mulligan was forced to remain in the city and return to his shop. It was then that his friend Alexander Hamilton suggested that Mulligan become a spy for the Continental Army. His proximity to the enemy made him an ideal candidate for espionage, and of course the tailor eagerly accepted. Throughout the war, Mulligan performed his new role perfectly by outfitting talkative, braggadocious British officers, appealing to their egos and asking the right questions. Mulligan gained valuable insight into the enemy's movements. He could oftentimes deduce the British Army's next move by inquiring when the officers needed their uniforms back. Very clever. After gaining such intelligence, Mulligan dispatched the news to Washington's headquarters. Twice, the spy's information prevented George Washington from ruin and potential assassination. Now, the first attempt on Washington's life in 1779 was described in two different books, both using the text of John C. Hamilton in his biography of his father, first released in 1834. Hamilton said, and I quote, that a plot was formed on the person of Washington. He had appointed to meet some officers at a designated place. Information was given by a female in the Tory interest, and the necessary arrangements were made to seize him. But timely intelligence frustrated the attempt, end quote. Well, Hamilton's book has a footnote describing how this intelligence was obtained, and I quote, a partisan officer, a native of New York, called at the shop of Mulligan late in the evening to obtain a watch coat. The late hour awakened curiosity. After some inquiries, the officer vauntingly boasted that before another day they would have his rebel general in his hands. This staunch patriot, as soon as the officer left him, hastened unobserved to the wharf and dispatched a billet by a Negro giving information of the design, end quote. Now, the second attempt on Washington's life was in 1781, and according to Michael O'Brien's book entitled Hercules Mulligan, Confidential Correspondent of General George Washington, written in 1937, in early March of 1781, Washington was to make a trip from his headquarters in New Windsor, New York, to Newport, Rhode Island, to confer with French General Rochambeau. The British got word of this movement and sent a force of 300 dragoons up the East River and across Long Island Sound to intercept him along the way as he passed through Lebanon, Connecticut. Hugh Mulligan found out about the British plan and relayed his information to our brave tailor Hercules, who, in turn, relayed the information to Washington. This narrative concludes that the capture was averted when Washington took a different and more secure route, arriving in Newport on March 6th. But, lest you think that was all, here are just a few of Mr. Mulligan's other accomplishments. Besides providing a room, as we mentioned, for Hamilton, while the young future Treasury Secretary attended King's College, he also heavily influenced his political thinking. He was a member of the Sons of Liberty of New York and one of 60 members of New York's Committee of Observation. He participated in the Battle of Golden Hill, a Boston Massacre-like event that occurred in New York 6 weeks prior to its more famous counterpart. He used a drunken conversation with New York City Mayor David Matthews to uncover and help thwart the Hickey Plot, the plot to assassinate George Washington. He was a member of the Committee of 100 in New York and played a major role in the political maneuverings that determined the first New York delegation to the Continental Congress. He also carried an escape plan from a New York City committee to George Washington when Washington was seemingly trapped in Brooklyn after the Battle of Long Island. Washington used this plan to escape to Manhattan. Also, his gathered intelligence revealed Howe's plan to sail south to Charleston in 1779 based on British requests for lighter weight uniforms. Again, very clever. He was arrested by the British after being singled out by Benedict Arnold as a potential intelligence operative. At his trial, and I love this, he utilized the gift of gab, his Irish blarney, to talk his way out of conviction. Well, after the war, a grateful George Washington visited Mulligan's store and requested new clothes. This was the war hero's way of protecting Mulligan from being labeled as a British sympathizer for working closely with the enemy. Outside his store, Mulligan proudly displayed a sign that read, "Clothier to General Washington." In 1785, Mulligan continued to fight for democratic ideals and co-founded the New York Manumission Society. He died in 1825 at age 80 and is buried next to Alexander Hamilton in Trinity Church. There are so many patriots we cover in this podcast. Patriots who, in one way or another, were invaluable to the spot where they were placed, where they served and lived. Hercules Mulligan was such a patriot. It begs the questions, what would have happened had he not heard, seen, and acted on the things he learned? Would our beloved General George Washington lived? Would the war have changed due to this? I'm sure you'd agree we're happy for this outcome we had, and of course, so grateful to know more about the story behind the story of George Washington. It is befitting, then, that there's a DAR Units Overseas chapter forming in Ireland that will be called the Hercules Mulligan chapter. How exciting! Organizing Chapter Regent Valerie Bronson is working hard towards gathering the charter chapter members, along with help, of course, from the Units Overseas National Chair Sherry Thorne-Salima, California State Registrar Rebecca Malmo, and others. It's just going to be lovely when we get to celebrate this new chapter, the first in Ireland. We'll be interviewing Valerie as soon as things are settled. The Patriot Profile segment is dedicated to all the patriots, known and unknown, that helped our country gain its independence. We offer you a parade of exemplary lives. May their selfless acts of patriotism inspire us and many generations to come.
I believe in the United States of America
as a government of the people,
by the people, for the people,
whose just powers are derived
from the consent of the governed.
A democracy in a republic,
a sovereign nation of many sovereign states,
a perfect union,
one and inseparable,
established upon those principles of freedom,
equality, justice, and humanity,
for which American patriots sacrificed their lives and fortunes.
I therefore believe
it is my duty to my country
to love it,
to support its Constitution,
to obey its laws,
to respect its flag,
and to defend it against all enemies.
We leave you today with this quote by Alexander Hamilton. "A nation which can prefer disgrace to danger, is prepared for a master and deserves one. Well, thanks for listening and be well, dear friends. Let's celebrate the stars and stripes forever and remember, with all of your ancestors behind you, you are the result of the love of thousands. Well, this podcast was written and produced by our incredible team of writers and editors, and we are, as always, so grateful for President General Pamela Edwards Rouse Wright and Historian General Suzanne Heskey for their constant guidance. To Valerie Bronson and Kathy Terrell for being so generous with their time. The National Society Daughters of the American Revolution is a nonprofit, non-political volunteer women's service organization dedicated to preserving our American history, securing the nation's future through better education, and promoting American patriotism. Members are all lineal descendants of those who supported the cause of independence in the Revolutionary War. For more information, please visit dar.org. This is the DAR Today podcast.